Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Elections Canada says a record 7.3 million Canadians casted early ballots over the long weekend. Plus, jury selection underway in trial of 5 former members of Canada's World Junior Hockey team. And it's Earth Day. The city congratulates residents for averting 13 million kilograms of waste from the landfill while introducing a new program for homeowners.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Elections Canada says a record number of Canadians cast a ballot early in advance polls this year. Over 4 days of polling between Friday and Monday, 7.3 million people voted. That's up 25% from early voting figures in the 2021 federal election. Canadians have until 6 p.m. local time today to cast their ballot early at their riding's Elections Canada office. Federal leaders are making their final pitches to voters across the country with less than a week to go until Election Day this Monday, April the 28th. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has unveiled his party's costed platform following the Liberals and NDP who released theirs over the weekend. Speaking in Vaughan, Ontario, Poilievre's election platform forecasts a $31 billion deficit this year and $100 billion in deficits over the next 4 years, along with billions of dollars in tax cuts and new revenues.
We will cut the Liberal deficit by 70% by cutting back on bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid to dictators, terrorists, and global bureaucracies, slashing money for special interests, and unleashing $500 billion of extra economic growth by unlocking the power of our resources and home building. We will, thank you. Now, in the past, I've told you that there would be a dollar for dollar law. Every dollar of new spending would need to be matched with a dollar of savings. We've gone even further. Every dollar of new spending in our platform, especially for things like defense, will be met with $1.50 in savings in other areas.
Liberal leader Mark Carney dismissed Poilievre's platform, saying it was back-of-the-napkin math that would cut programs and spending that Canadians need. Carney and Bloc Québécois leader François Blanchet are campaigning today in Quebec. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is in Vancouver and Edmonton. Mark Carney continues to lie his way through his campaign. That's according to political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. The Liberal leader said it's a fact Poilievre would ban abortion, even though the Tory leader has said he would not ban it. Lilley lists off some highlights of what he says are Carney's less than truthful statements.
And he lied about having nothing to do with moving Brookfield's headquarters from Toronto to New York. He lied about when he claimed that he helped Paul Martin balance the budget when the budget was balanced in 1998 and Carney didn't start working at the finance department until 2004. He lied when he said that, you remember that big signing ceremony where he signed the document and said, I've gotten rid of the carbon tax. The document that he signed in front of the cameras had no legal authority. It wasn't an order in council. It was make-believe. He said that he wouldn't talk to Donald Trump until Donald Trump showed Canada some respect. And we find out later that on his first day, he reached out to try and call Donald Trump, and Trump wouldn't return his call for 2 weeks. He said Thunderstruck by AC/DC was the song he warmed up to as a goalie when that song didn't come out until 1990, long after Mark Carney stopped playing hockey at high school or university level. Like, there's so many things that this guy lies about. He's casual with the truth, to put it bluntly.
Brian Lilley also discusses Jagmeet Singh and his NDP party, which seems to be fading into oblivion. He says Singh is focused on the wrong target. That interview is coming up right after business news. Alberta is reporting 29 new cases of measles in the province. The government says many of the new cases are in the southern and central parts of the province. AHS is reporting exposures in Calgary on April 11th at Cross Iron Mills Mall, as well as IKEA. Exposures were also reported on April 14th at both the Tabor and Coaldale Health Centers. There was another exposure at the Tabor Health Center on the 15th and in Lethbridge at the Diagnostic Imaging Department at Chinook Regional Hospital on April 16th. There have now been 118 measles cases reported in Alberta since early last month. Today is Earth Day, and to mark the day, the City of Lethbridge has launched an environmental incentive program which offers rebates for the purchase of rain barrels and the upgrade of older high-flow toilets. The program begins today and runs until December 31st. The municipality's environmental manager, Mark Svensson, explains how the initiative's rebates work.
And essentially what it is they can purchase a rain barrel or a low-flow toilet, up to 2 of each per utility account. And the city will reimburse up to, or 50% up to $100 per item. We've identified about $50,000 that has been set aside for this program specifically. The snowpack that fills those reservoirs is less than normal and actually less than last year at this time. With that in mind, we are going to be asking the public to again be conscious of their water usage and voluntarily reduce their usage this year. The forecast is that it's going to be dry to very dry the spring and summer. And so we want to make sure the public is aware of that and plan accordingly. So using things like rain barrels, so investing in rain barrels, investing in low-flow toilets, are things that you can do now that you only have to think about once, really, and then they have lasting effects over time, rather than having to think about it every time you do something, right? So being conscious of that as we go into another dry year is very important.
The initiative is part of the Water Conservation Plan and Strategy approved by City Council in April of 2024. And the city is patting residents on the back for another environmentally friendly program. It says close to 13 million kilograms of organic waste have been diverted from the city's landfill thanks to Curbside Organics programs, which celebrated its second year anniversary today. In addition, the city has given more than 56,000 kilograms of free coulis compost to residents at several giveaway events, and around 24,500 kilograms of compost has been used in city parks, gardens, cemeteries, and green spaces. With warmer weather here to stay, weekly green cart collection will resume in May. The city is also hosting a free coulis compost giveaway at Legacy Park on Saturday, April 26th from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. Jury selection is now underway in the trial of the 5 former members of Canada's World Junior Hockey team. Carter Hart, Michael McLeod, Cal Foote, and Alex Formenton have all pleaded not guilty to sexual assault charges stemming from an incident that allegedly took place in London, Ontario in June of 2018. The charges relate to an incident that allegedly occurred as many of the team's members were in London for a Hockey Canada gala celebrating their gold medal win at that year's World Junior Tournament. The complainant cannot be identified under a standard publication ban. Harvard University announced Monday that it's suing the Trump administration to stop the federal freeze on more than $2 billion in grants. According to this next report by the Associated Press, it's because the Ivy League institution said it would defy the president's demands to stop activism on its campus.
Harvard University has filed a lawsuit to halt a federal freeze on more than $2.2 billion in grants. It comes after the university announced it would defy the Trump administration's demands to limit activism on campus and make changes to its admissions policies. The administration also demanded the university audit views of diversity on campus and stop recognizing some student clubs, arguing universities allowed anti-Semitism to go unchecked at campus protests last year.
I think Harvard's a disgrace. I think what they did was a disgrace. They're obviously anti-Semitic.
Harvard says it has already made extensive reforms to address anti-Semitism. Harvard's suit called the funding freeze arbitrary and capricious, saying it violated its First Amendment rights. For the Trump administration, Harvard presents the first major hurdle in its attempt to force change at universities that Republicans say have become hotbeds of liberalism and anti-Semitism.
The U.S. Supreme Court is hearing arguments over the religious rights of parents in Maryland to remove their children from elementary school classes using storybooks with LGBTQ characters. Tuesday's case is the latest dispute involving religion to come before the conservative-led court. The justices have repeatedly endorsed claims of religious discrimination in recent years. The Montgomery County Public Schools in suburban Washington, D.C. introduced the storybooks as part of an effort to better reflect the district's diverse population. Parents sued after the school system stopped allowing them to pull their kids from lessons that included the books. ABC Express is the newest early childhood literacy program launching this Friday, April 25th in Colehurst. Its aim is to encourage parents to engage with their children through the 5 early literacy practices, which include singing, playing, speaking, reading, and writing. The deputy mayor of the town of Colehurst, Deb Florence, says the program will run every other Friday. She gives more details.
It's designed to help parents and caregivers engage their children age 0 to 6 in activities that build foundational literacy skills, offering parents new tools to boost their kids' growth. So by integrating the FCSS Stay and Play program, it creates a fun, supportive environment to foster a new love for learning. The bookmobile staff will be on hand just in a half-an-hour session as part of the 2-hour Stay and Play session to run the guided activity. It's the free half-hour session within the FCSS Stay and Play. And the Stay and Play is again from 9:30 to 11:30 at the Colehurst District Community Center.
Florence says the pilot program will run until this June, but the hope is to continue and expand the program based on community participation. In sports, it's playoff season, and it turned out a late push was not enough when the Edmonton Oilers erased a 4-goal deficit before the Los Angeles Kings scored with 41 seconds left to seal a wild playoff opener. Here's Jenna Karsten-Smith with the Canadian Press.
A late push wasn't enough for the Edmonton Oilers last night as they fell 6-5 to the LA Kings in Game 1 of their first-round playoff series. LA took a 4-0 lead late in the second period, but Edmonton rallied and tied the game at 5-5 with less than 90 seconds to go in regulation. Kings forward Philippe Deneau sealed the victory with his second goal of the game in the final minute. Connor McDavid led the charge for the Oilers with a goal and 3 assists. Leon Draisaitl and Corey Perry contributed 1 of each. Head coach Chris Knobloch says the Oilers are a resilient group who can handle a lot of adversity. Edmonton will look to bounce back tomorrow when they meet the Kings in LA once again for Game 2. The series will then shift to Edmonton for Games 3 and 4.
Also, the underdog Montreal Canadiens rallied back from a 2-goal deficit before Washington Capitals captain Alex Ovechkin scored the overtime winner, the first of his career, by the way. Here is the Canadian Press's Daniel Rainbird.
The Montreal Canadiens lost 3-2 in overtime to the Washington Capitals in their first-round Stanley Cup playoff series opener. But the Canadiens kept their heads high after the game because of their performance. Montreal rallied back from a 2-0 deficit when Washington looked like it had all the momentum. The Capitals, who are far more experienced than the Canadiens, came out with a lot of physicality and looked like they might bulldoze their way to a victory. That all changed midway through the third period after Montreal had weathered the storm a little. A Canadiens power play led to a goal by Cole Caulfield, and captain Nick Suzuki followed up with an equalizer minutes later. Alex Ovechkin, the Capitals captain, scored twice, including the overtime winner. It was his first playoff overtime winner of his career, despite being the NHL's greatest goal scorer after surpassing Wayne Gretzky's record earlier this month. Game 2 is set for Wednesday night back here at Capital One Arena, where the Canadiens believe they'll have a much better chance of getting a win.
Across the pond, tourists visiting Israel are having second thoughts about swimming off the country's Mediterranean coast. Police are continuing to search for a swimmer who they fear may have been attacked by a shark. The area has for decades seen close encounters between the marine predator and beachgoers.
A swimmer in Israel has apparently been attacked by a shark off of the country's Mediterranean coast. Police have been scouring the site for traces of the man, who went missing in an area where large numbers of sharks tend to gather over the winter months. That's because there's a power plant there that sends warm water into the sea. While swimming isn't allowed in this particular stretch of beach, swimmers, snorkelers, kayakers, and other boaters enter the waters regularly. And what we've seen over recent days is crowds of people swimming with these dusky and sandbar sharks in the sea. People have been swimming with them, they've been tugging at their tails, some have been feeding them. Shark attacks are very rare in Israel. This would be the third recorded time that such an attack has happened. Still, environmental groups say that Israeli authorities must do more to separate humans from this marine predator.
Yeah, something tells me you shouldn't be tugging at a shark's tail. Well, when it comes to cute, it doesn't get much cuter than a baby elephant. This is the first Asian elephant calf born through artificial insemination. Jet was born in November of last year to his mother Jade and his father Jake, and now weighs almost 600 pounds. The zoo says Jet's schedule will vary, but visitors may spot him exploring the habitat or catch a glimpse of him from a nearby elevated railroad. What a little cutie he is. By the way, Jet has gained about 300 pounds since he was born in November. Poor mama elephant. Here I thought I had a hard time. Well, one thing not giving us a hard time is our weather. It's about to turn gorgeous outside here in southern Alberta. After today, it's bye-bye single-digit temperatures. I'll be right back with the full forecast. So we woke up to a fairly overcast day today with a slight chance of showers, and then bam, just like that, the sun came out. It's about to get gorgeous. Bye-bye single-digit temperatures right there. And hello, lovely, beautiful teen temperatures. Yeah, so as we go from the 9, we're going to jump up to 13 degrees by tomorrow, Wednesday, with clear skies. Beautiful sunshine again on Thursday, high of 15. I love how that just keeps climbing. Then on Friday, overcast again, but high of 11, still sticking in those double digits. And then all the way up to 18 on Saturday. Love that. And then the farmers are going to love this forecast, because from Saturday night right through Monday, we are seeing a chance of showers. So it's starting with 30% and then 60% as we get into the weekend there. High of 14, though, on a Sunday and Monday as well. Along with those showers. So average high for this time of year, 15, average low, 1 degree. 27 was the record temperature on this day back in 1969, and in 1967, only 2 years earlier, was the record low, minus 18. 6:25, that is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening, 8:35. It's giving us 14 hours and 10 minutes of daylight. Might I add, 3 minutes longer than yesterday. I love that. Okay, on the west coast tomorrow, seeing some lovely teen temperatures here and sunshine. So sunny skies, fog patches, 16 in Victoria, more like 13 though, the closer that you get to the water there. 14 degrees in Vancouver, but more inland, we're talking 18 degrees. And then in Edmonton, high of 12 degrees with 30% chance of early morning showers. Calgary starting out sunny, and then we're looking at mix of sun and cloud by noon, high of 13 degrees there. And then in Saskatoon, same thing. The day starts out sunny, could see a little bit more cloud coverage as the day progresses, high of 13 there. Regina sitting at 8 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. Winnipeg, 60% a chance of showers and a high of 9 degrees. Now, as we look over into Toronto, we are seeing, mainly clear skies. There are a little bit of cloud coverage, high of 16, but 10 degrees only by the lake. If you are by the lake, they're expected to not be in the teens. 15, though, in Ottawa with clear skies, and high of 12 degrees in Montreal tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. As we look to the Maritimes here, we are seeing chances of showers, so 30% chance of showers with fog patches in all 3 of those cities there. So Fredericton and Halifax sitting at 12, high of 10 degrees in Charlottetown, and a mix of sun and cloud expected in St. John's tomorrow with the 20 to 40 kilometer per hour winds and a high of 8 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Canada's largest private sector union says Hudson's Bay has ended commission pay for employees as the company liquidates most of its stores. Unifor says commissions were eliminated as of Sunday for staff working in cosmetics departments and those who earn extra cash on sales of big-ticket items like appliances. The union says these workers will be shifted to a base salary only, and Hudson's Bay says reduced product inventory and sales are the reason behind the decision. The move comes as Hudson's Bay winds down all but 6 of its stores as its restructuring under the court protection from creditors continues. The International Monetary Fund says the American and global economies will likely slow significantly in the wake of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs and the uncertainty they have created. The IMF predicts the global economy will grow just 2.8% this year, down from its forecast in January of 3.3%. The fund says global growth will be 3% in the next year, also below its previous 3.3% estimate. It also says every country in the world is affected by hikes in U.S. import taxes that have now lifted average U.S. duties to about 25%. EV manufacturer Tesla's first quarter profits plunged by 70% to $409 million, or 12 cents a share. That is far below analysts' estimates. This comes amid a backlash against CEO Elon Musk and the car company that has hurt sales and sent stock spiraling. Tesla's revenue fell 9% to $19.3 billion in January through March period. The company is struggling to sell cars to consumers angry over Musk's leadership of a U.S. federal government cost-cutting group, which has cut jobs and divided Americans while sparking protests. Now here is a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 297 points on the day to finish at 24,305. The Dow was up 1,016 points to 39,186. The S&P 500 is up 129 to 5,287, and the Nasdaq was up 429 points to 16,300. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 110 to 63.51 US per barrel. Natural gas was up a cent to 303 US. Gold was down 53.54 to 33.80.84 US an ounce. Silver was down 25 cents to 32.48 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.90 per bushel. Barley is at $6.90. Canola is at $15.21, and corn is at $8.25 per bushel. Live cattle were up 160 to 211.37. Feeder cattle's May contract was up 140 to 286.92, and lean hog's May contract was up 120 to 92.22. And the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 72.40 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Elections Canada says a record number of Canadians cast a ballot early in advance polls this year. Over 4 days of polling between Friday and Monday, 7.3 million people voted. That's up 25% from early voting figures in the 2021 federal election. We are just days away from a federal election, and the party leaders are ramping up their promises. After the break, political reporter Brian Lilly gives us his thoughts and explains why he believes Liberal leader Mark Carney's campaign is filled with lies. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or our YouTube page anytime to check out more of our stories and our interviews. With less than a week to go till Election Day, party leaders are really ramping up their promises. We heard from the NDPs and Liberals over the weekend about their costed platforms, but Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's platform was released today, and here to break that down is political commentator Brian Lilly of the Toronto Sun. Brian, hello, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so Brian, what stood out most for you about Poilievre's platform, which was released Tuesday morning?
Let me start off by saying that I'm not a fan of fully costed platforms. These are documents that they became very trendy during the Chrétien years with, oh, look, I've got a plan, and John Chrétien waving around the red book, but I've never seen a government that actually follows through on them. But they give you an idea, I guess, of where the government wants to go. What I would say about Pierre Poilievre's platform release is that it's reasonable. It's responsible. I would call it holistic. It looks at economic growth. It looks at ways to find savings that are not going to gut public services that people rely upon. He adds in things that some people would be shocked at, such as a lot of supports for families dealing with children with special needs, things like that. But overall tries to look forward with economic growth, tries to say look, here are the problems we've been dealing with in terms of a housing affordability crisis, in terms of slow economic growth, and here is how we are going to fix them. Um, Lots of spending on defense, savings in terms of cutting the tens of billions of dollars a year that we spend on consultants, and giving Canadians a tax cut so that we get to keep more of our own money. They're promising over several years a 15% tax cut on income tax. They're going to cut the GST on building new homes, things like that. And also, they're promising tax cuts if you invest in Canada. That's something Pierre Poilievre has been out with before. So, not a lot of new things in the platform release, but bringing together everything that he's been talking about, all the policies, and putting it forward. And unlike Mark Carney's plan, well, far more reasonable deficits and a path. He doesn't promise to balance the budget, but it's moving towards that.
Okay. And one issue Poilievre mentions is one that a lot of Albertans find important, and that is provincial autonomy. So what's Poilievre promising there?
He's not going to infringe on provincial jurisdiction, which is, it's funny when you talk about national unity. One of the things that really irritates Alberta and really irritates Quebec is when the federal government decides we know better. Sure, you guys run healthcare. Sure, you guys run education, but we know better and we're going to run the system for you. That just really irritates those two provinces in particular. Other provinces are less annoyed by it, but Alberta and Quebec in particular, very annoyed by this. So he promises to respect provincial autonomy when it comes to resource development, when it comes to how healthcare and education and things like that are run. He promises to scrap things like the electricity tax, which has become an annoyance to several provinces. So, it's a very different way of looking at things than the Liberals. The Liberals are viewed as, well, they're the party of national unity, except they're the party that normally exacerbates national unity because of these national programs. Look at childcare. Childcare is a provincial responsibility, and yet the feds go in there and they try and dictate terms, and they say you've got to do all these things. Then they don't fund it enough, and then the program starts faltering, as it has in Alberta, as it has in Ontario and every other province. And then the feds say, well, you're just not doing enough. Well, no, it's your program and you're not funding it, and now you're blaming us. These are the types of things that Poilievre says you'll get out of the way of. On childcare, by the way, this is something that Mark Carney and his Liberals keep saying. Well, if you elect Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, they're going to get rid of our childcare program. Poilievre has been clear in the past and in his platform. They will get out of the way of the provinces. And if you want to deliver it a certain way, deliver it that way, whether it's for profit, not for profit, home based childcare. Deliver it how you see fit, but make sure that families are looked after. That's a far better way than trying to say, no, 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 you can't have more than 20% of this style of childcare. No, Poilievre is saying, have the childcare that families need at a price they can afford. We'll fund you. You figure out the rest.
Now, you mentioned Carney's platform there projecting much larger deficits, and the Conservative plan projects smaller deficits. So, but how do the two plans compare outside of that?
Well, so in the first year, Mark Carney's Liberal platform would project a deficit of about 62 billion. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are predicting half of that. So one, they're going to spend less. Carney and the Liberals have projected far higher spending than the Conservatives. And they're also the Conservatives will try and find savings. Things like cutting the tens of billions of dollars that are spent by the federal government on consultants. Now, look, I spent decades living in Ottawa. Normally, what happens in Ottawa is, going back to the Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien years, they cut the civil service. They said, okay, we need to balance the budget. We're going to cut the civil service. And so people were laid off. A lot of those people were brought back in as consultants because the government still needs people to run. What the Trudeau Liberals have done, and what the Carney Liberals propose to keep doing, is to increase. So they have increased the size of the civil service by 30 to 40%, but they've also more than doubled the cost of consultants. So, you're paying tens of thousands of more bureaucrats, but also paying billions of dollars more to consultants who tell the bureaucrats what to do. Well, why are you paying both? So they're promising to find savings in that. They're promising to generate new revenues by dropping things like Bill C-69 and unleashing the resource revenue, getting rid of the emissions cap, again, unleashing resource revenue. All of these things that will, let the economy grow and take care of itself. A lot of people say, well, if the government's going to spend more, it's going to find savings, it's got to cut something. Let me tell you, I'll speak from the Ontario example because, as you know, I'm sitting here at Queen's Park, the Ontario legislature. For all the complaints that Doug Ford is not a conservative, he has increased spending every year. Absolutely. But he hasn't raised a tax once. Why? Because he's grown the economy. And that's what Poilievre is promising to do. There will be an increase in spending. Yes, there will be a decrease in the deficit. How do you do that? You grow the economy. It really is that simple.
Okay. And then we have the Liberals selling Mark Carney as this serious leader, an economist, but, and he's calling for fiscal prudence. But doesn't this massive spending plan shoot a hole in that claim about Carney?
I couldn't believe when I was listening to Mark Carney's platform release over the weekend. I believe it was Saturday. He released his platform and he talked about how this was fiscal responsibility. This was prudence. And it's $130 billion in additional spending. So this is above and beyond. This is not, additional deficit. That's what it's going to be. Excuse me. The Trudeau spending plan was not curtailed, which you would have expected based on Mark Carney's rhetoric up until Saturday. Instead, he's going to add 130 billion. There's going to be 250 billion in deficit spending over the next bunch of years. It is unbelievable that this is the direction that they're going to go. And yet they call it prudent. They call it fiscally responsible. It is neither of those. I've been pointing out for a while, just because someone has economists behind their name doesn't mean that they have good policies. And if you don't believe me or you think, well, you're just being partisan because Mark Carney's a liberal, look at someone like Peter Navarro, who is in Donald Trump's inner circle. Peter Navarro has an economics PhD from Harvard University. Peter Navarro, and I would say that a Harvard PhD in economics is equal to Mark Carney's PhD in economics from Oxford. These two universities are on the same level. Peter Navarro is advocating for Donald Trump to, push the tariff issue. This is the way to prosperity. So just because Peter Navarro has a PhD in economics doesn't make him immune from bad ideas. And the same would be true of Mark Carney. Lots of smart people have very bad policies or ideas. And I would say that Mark Carney falls into that camp when you look at his out of control spending. He's going far and above what Justin Trudeau projected and far and above what the parliamentary budget officer projected based on the Trudeau promises, which is higher than what Trudeau promised. He's just going to shoot right past them. And that is going to cause all kinds of problems for Canada.
Now, speaking of Carney there, you have accused him of lying many times in this election campaign, and of course that's a harsh accusation to make, but you just did it again over comments he made on Monday. So why are you saying Carney is lying?
So he was asked about why he's claiming that Pierre Poilievre is going to ban abortion in Canada.
Yeah.
And the reporter that asked the question pointed out that Poilievre has said, we're not going to do that. Oh, Carney said, well, it's not just an accusation, it's a fact. But it's not a fact. Poilievre stood on stage with him last week in Montreal at the leaders' debate and said he would not do that this has been Conservative Party policy for the last 20 plus years, that he wasn't going to do it. Why is he doing it? Because Poilievre says he will keep mass murderers in jail longer and he'll use the notwithstanding clause to do it. So from that, Carney takes that he will ban abortion and use the notwithstanding clause. What's fascinating about this is that Carney, who puts himself forward as a very serious Catholic, had just finished talking about Pope Francis, who had passed, and we just got the news on Monday morning. So Carney's talking about the moral clarity of Pope Francis, how he learned from this great spiritual and religious leader. He talked about how he cited Pope Francis's writings on the economy and capitalism, on the environment in his own writings. And then he turned around and lied about Pierre Poilievre and his policies. I'm sorry. There's an older teaching that says you shall not bear false witness. And that's what Mark Carney did. He was bearing false witness about Pierre Poilievre and his policies. Carney has lied. And look, I know that's a harsh term, but when you are outright lying, you're not trying to just spin something in your favor. That's lying. And he lied about having nothing to do with moving Brookfield's headquarters from Toronto to New York. He lied about when he claimed that he helped Paul Martin balance the budget when the budget was balanced in 1998 and Carney didn't start working at the finance department until 2004. He lied when he said that you remember that big signing ceremony where he signed the document and said, I've gotten rid of the carbon tax. The document that he signed in front of the cameras had no legal authority. It wasn't an order in council. It was make believe. He said that he wouldn't talk to Donald Trump until Donald Trump showed Canada some respect. And we find out later that on his first day, he reached out to try and call Donald Trump, and Trump wouldn't return his call for 2 weeks. He said Thunderstruck by AC/DC was the song he warmed up to as a goalie when that song didn't come out until 1990, long after Mark Carney stopped playing hockey at high school or university level. Like, there's so many things that this guy lies about. He's casual with the truth, to put it bluntly.
Oh my gosh. Let's talk about the NDP for a minute here. So Jagmeet Singh and the NDP keep fading into oblivion. They seem absent from the campaign, really. And you said that during the debates last week, Singh seemed focused on the wrong target. So why do you think he was focused on the Conservatives instead of the Liberals?
That was so puzzling to me and to so many other people because, look, early on, Pierre Poilievre had taken some of the NDP voters, especially blue collar workers who used to be with them. But really, they've been leaving the NDP for a long time because the NDP cares more about the faculty club than the union hall. They don't care about blue collar workers that, work in steel mills or in auto factories or anything like that anymore. They're worried about the downtown faculty club. But some of them had moved to the Conservatives. But lately, the NDP support has collapsed down to single digits. And almost all of it has gone to Mark Carney and the Liberals. And yet there he was, constantly interrupting Pierre Poilievre, attacking Pierre Poilievre. And I forget who it was, but someone in the parliamentary press gallery reached out to Singh's team and said, why? And they were told, well, it's because it's personal for him. He really doesn't like Pierre Poilievre. Well, look, are you interested in winning or just attacking someone you don't like personally? Because the other guy that you're not attacking as much is stealing your voters. You should be attacking him. No, Jagmeet Singh doesn't think that way. Look, I was just watching him before we started talking, and Jagmeet Singh's out in Vancouver, and he's talking about, well, make sure you don't just send liberals, send some of you Democrats so we can keep them honest. He's not even trying to win the election. He's not pretending. I mean, he probably shouldn't pretend at this point, but he's just saying, send you Democrats so that we can keep them honest. This is not a good strategy.
Yeah, I think he's actually come out and said like, look, I'm not running for PM anymore, obviously. There's no way he can. Okay, let's talk about polls for a second here. A lot of people hate them. They say don't really put a lot of stock in them, but polls look like they've gotten closer, but most still have the Liberals leading. So are they close enough looking that the Conservatives could still win based on the polls?
Well, the Conservatives definitely have momentum right now. Whether you're talking Abacus Data, Leger, Ipsos, these are three of the big polling firms that are legit. There are others that have been all over the map that I don't put a lot of stock in. So the Conservatives have momentum right now. They're doing well, obviously, across the prairies where you are in Alberta. They're doing well in Saskatchewan. I think they will do well and hold on to, look, those 7 seats in Manitoba, very important. If they can hold those, that's great. And they're doing pretty well in British Columbia. So they're going to be competitive there, could win a bunch of seats. It's Ontario that matters right now. They're even doing well in Quebec and could pick up a couple of seats. Atlantic Canada, that's probably not going to be great for them. But Ontario is what matters. They've closed the gap a bit. We'll see how this momentum goes over the next bunch of days, because if they can really pick up the momentum, they could close the gap. Looking at a minority, or if things go very well, it's an outside chance of a majority, but they could either win a minority themselves or hold the Liberals to a minority at this point. This is a battleground, and you know, Atlantic Canada is settled on the Liberals. The prairies have mostly settled on the Conservatives. BC and Ontario remain the battlegrounds. And right now, the Liberals still hold about a 6 to 7 point lead in Ontario. If they can close that and win in the right places, the Conservatives have a shot. Without that, they won't. Big rally in the suburbs of Toronto tonight. Big platform release here. Expect the Conservatives to spend most of the last week of the campaign trying to win votes in and around the Toronto, the GTA in Ontario, because if they can't do that, they can't win.
Oh, it'll be interesting to see what happens in a week's time here, won't it, Brian? Political commentator Brian Lilley of the Toronto Sun, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
It seems in every federal election, the issue of gun control comes up. Our nation continues to see high levels of violent crime, which many believe is fueled by the number of guns in Canada. But are the rights of registered gun owners, hunters, and sport shooters being violated with government restrictions? And will gun restrictions actually reduce violent crime? Or is it just virtue signaling? Joining us to chat about this is Rick Blakely. He is the president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association and Sport Shooting Facility. Rick, great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
First of all, can you just tell us a little bit about the Lethbridge Shooting Sport Facility? Where is it located and what kind of sport shooting takes place there?
Well, it's located in Penequin Park, down in the coulees. The use of the range. Let's start with we have Blood Tribe Police, Lethbridge City Police. We have a whole bunch of police departments that use us, K Division, RCMP. So that's one use that's quite prevalent during the day. We put in a $1 million carbine range for them. So that's a fairly active and revenue generating piece of our range. The other pieces are sport shooting. There's a number of different sports that people participate in. They're really passionate about it. And so we have, about $150,000 worth of machines that throw shotgun targets all over the place so people can try and hit them. They aren't big enough for me. Then we have long range, 300-yard range for hunters to make sure that they are ethical hunters. That's really important because you don't want to. Hunting is actually the harvesting of animals to bring populations in line, and you don't want to injure an animal. Ethical hunters want to make sure that the animal is euthanized fairly quickly. Then we have, we're just putting in about $85,000 worth of archery, 3D targets, and equipment down there to improve our archery range. That's another area where hunters come down and hone their skills. And competitive shooters. We have provincial 3D archery target winners. We have all sorts of people down there. We have a handgun fellow who has competed in the Pan American Games. We now have a person who is working on he's training for the World Championship 3-gun competition. I believe that's happening in Czech Republic. So the range is really active with a lot of people who are passionate about making some little thing go as far as they can and hit a place in the distance. So that's basically in a nuts. We have a bunch of programs for children. We have a classroom, and the classroom has an air gun range in it, and so youth go in there and learn from our fellow who is the ISSS champion. Anyway, I could spend half an hour telling you what we do down there.
Well, sounds like you have a lot of stuff going on at the range there. Sounds like there's a lot to experience there. So, but moving forward now, can you give viewers an update on where we're currently at with Canada's gun laws that have been changed since 2020 with Bill C-71 and Bill C-21 as to handguns and so-called assault weapons?
Well, that's an interesting topic. The government has called these things assault rifles, but really the rifles that they're talking about, in particular that popular one, the AR-15, is actually Armalite Rifle 15. It was designed for people who did 3-gun competitions, and so it's light and it's versatile. The firearms used in the past for assault rifles were had a wood stock, and you had to hold them kind of funny. But in the Vietnam War, they were walking through the jungle and they got jumped, so they had to be able to acquire a target really quickly. So those guns have what we call a tactical stock, which means that they're just ergonometrically better than the previous wood stocks. The government decided that anything that looks like that is an assault rifle. As a matter of fact, they banned the 22 caliber, which is a really small caliber used for blinking. There's 2 different versions of it: a word stock and what they call a tactical stock. The actions are the same, yet the tactical stock gun is prohibited and the wood stock is not. It really doesn't make sense. It's mostly political gesturing, or it's I guess you could call it gaslighting. It's trying to satisfy the citizens that they're doing something, but really what they're doing is vilifying people who are actually quite patriotic citizens who are licensed, who have taken training, who the RCMP have done background checks. As a matter of fact, the statistics on people who are licensed doing anything violent is less than a percentage. If any one of our licensed firearm owners is violent, even in a hockey game, playing hockey, they can lose their ability to shoot. Yet the government seems to want to not allow, but with the current justice system and with the border controls, they allow the criminals to basically run free with firearms, even machine guns, which are definitely assault rifles, assault pistols. They're designed exactly for what they're saying that we have.
Now, the federal government has put a buyback mandate in place and is trying to force gun owners to surrender their banned weapons to the government, which promises to buy them back at fair market value. Has that actually started yet? And if so, how many guns have they bought back so far, and at what cost?
Well, you got to remember there's 2.2 million licensed firearm owners in Canada. That's a fairly large political group, and if you include the people they influence. The government put the legislation through in an order in council originally, it isn't debated. It's just the Governor General puts it in. And so they never owned them. They can't buy something back that they never owned. It's just a political gesture to say they're working on crime, yet crime has increased dramatically since they took power.
And what kind of impact is this having on gun owners and also on gun store business owners?
Well, let's start with the range. They seem to be really focused on eliminating all firearms from civilian use, and that's been a stated goal by many, including the current person who's running for the Liberal Party. I'm beyond words on that topic. Yeah.
Now, we should probably ask, what exactly is an assault weapon? You mentioned the AR-15, AR not standing for assault rifle, but Armalite. I know one of the terms the government used previously was firearms designed for the battlefield, which That sounds scary, but is that anywhere close to an accurate description?
Well, I've talked to many soldiers, and none of them would go into battle with any of these firearms that they've banned. They're semi-automatics. A soldier needs a firearm that'll shoot rapidly, like a machine gun or 3-shot bursts. These things are not. Well, some of them are bolt-action rifles, so they are not definitely not military grade. The joke is that they're going to give them to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians wouldn't take them into battle if they wanted. So it's kind of ridiculous. And back to your other question, if they ban all firearms, that means our range will close. We won't have a range. We won't have a place. Well, I guess it'll still be there, but we have a number of people who are passionate. The businesses have lost billions already. We're closing sporting goods stores, like what I understand, quite dramatically, including those in Lethbridge, and that's an economic hit to us.
And I believe that the groups pushing for gun control are doing so out of honesty held beliefs that this will increase public safety. But what do the stats actually tell us?
The stats say that licensed gun owners are less than 1%, and that crime has increased dramatically. And I forget the stat. I mean, it's a fairly large. If you look at the graph, it's going up quite considerably because of the lack of control at the border. Guns are coming across the border. They're coming in from Europe. The gangs are growing in size and power. I heard about a fellow who was caught with drugs and guns and cash, and the judge, I don't know if this is true, but the judge gave him his cash back, sent him on his way, and a policeman caught him buying a new gun on the streets of on the steps of the court. So is that effective? I would say not.
So, and you're talking about gang crime in our cities, and so will this legislation actually fix anything? Are criminals law-abiding citizens in one area but not? And where are criminals getting their weapons from?
Well, citizens are being vilified, and criminals and gangs are being encouraged. If you ask me, there seems to be no punishment for criminal activity, especially violent criminal activity. It's counterintuitive. It really is. It doesn't make sense. So that's why I kind of like Poilievre's phrase, common sense legislation.
So now we're coming up to a federal election. So are there any federal parties that would repeal Bill C-71 or make changes to protect the rights of gun owners?
Oh, definitely. The conservatives under Poilievre have said this is ridiculous. It isn't a solution. We should be spending the millions, it could be billions, that would be spent on a buyback program on mental health, on police, on jail, on actually working with the youth to dissuade young people from going into gangs.
So let's switch gears for a bit here and talk about the many individuals and even families with kids who come out to the Lethbridge sports shooting range. Is this a safe sport?
Thank you for asking. We did a presentation to council about, I think it's 5 or 6 levels of safety. Our first level is everybody who uses the range, or everybody who uses the range should be a range officer, and that's a 4-hour training that we do, and it's mostly about attitude and being safe. And we're one of the only ranges in the middle of the city, so we have to be extra safe, and that's why we put in extra measures to ensure the safety of the range, including things that would catch errant bullets, bullet traps, all sorts of stuff. So there's about 6 levels of safety, up to and including the big coolie wall at the back of the range. The range officers are in charge of safety. and they guarantee that people will be safe. As a matter of fact, kind of interesting, a lot of them are coaches, and they do training, and they take, well, we've got youth groups that come in, and one of the things that we've found is, especially with single parent mothers and people who don't have a lot of money, our sport is pretty cheap because we provide the firearms and the ammunition for the children. And we're finding that they're getting out of the basement and the video games with blood and gore and coming and actually feeling what it feels like to be very responsible, understanding what rules are and why they're rules, and you know, um, they become much better citizens because they understand what it's like to be responsible for something that could be very dangerous if in the wrong hands. I mean, you used the term weapon earlier in the discussion. A weapon is something that is used by the military. It's used to kill people. A firearm, we use the term firearm because that's a term used to put a little piece of lead downrange and hit a target, hit something that is fairly inert. So
you talked about it being an affordable sport to get into. So for parents that are, maybe want to get their child involved, but they're a little strapped on cash, what are we talking about for costs to get involved?
Nothing.
Wow.
That's what we do for the community. We when we took out a grant from the city, we promised to do $30,000 worth of community service. This last year, we did it was about $120,000 worth of work with youth, with the community, and that's volunteer hours and ammunition and targets and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we do. We've got over 2,000 members, and we've got revenue from all of the police agencies using the range. For that, we can afford to do a lot of stuff for people. As a matter of fact, lately we've had children bringing their parents down to the range because they want to get out of the basement, and they want to get out in the outdoors, and they want to be with other people.
And it's a good time of the year to do it as we head into the warmer months. Rick Blakely is the president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association and Sport Shooting Facility. Rick, thank you so much for your time today.
You are so welcome, and thank you for asking these very good questions. You have a good day.
You're welcome. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.